Hello, Deirdre.
Hello, Martin. And hello, everyone. Welcome to the DM show.
Yeah, it's great to see everyone again. Great to be here. And I'm really excited about this show and our guest. I think what we'd like is just to ask everyone to introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from. I see Lisa's here, Sahar is here.
I see someone from the West Coast is here.
Yeah, so welcome and please share your comments and questions throughout. So, Deirdre, we are on a short hiatus coming up, aren't we?
Yes, we got a little vacation,
We
Martin,
do.
in May.
Yeah, that's right. So, we're not going to be live in May. So, it gives you time to catch up on all the ones
That's
you've
right.
missed. Of course, we know that's much must watch viewing or shows. Anyway, but we won't be here in May, but we'll be back in June, and we'll have lots to tell you about our June show. More people. Eduardo from Namibia. Welcome, Veronica. Good to see you again. Veronica's a former student. Georgios Carol Jensen from Toronto. Hello. Also from Toronto. Nehemia Matthews, Christian Honey, James Dakey.
Oh, nice crowd today.
Yeah, Peniel Orioi from the UK, Tsitsi from Harare, Zimbabwe, Alatha from India.
Oh, my
So,
goodness.
wow, people from all over the
Global
world.
audience.
Welcome. And yeah, I guess we should kick things off.
Yes. Well, welcome, everybody. And we're going to introduce our very special guest today. Joining us on the show is Danielle Guzman. She's global head of social media at Marsh McLennan. And Danielle develops and executes a comprehensive vision and global social media strategy across her organization's different businesses. I can say a lot about Danielle, but so much better to bring her into the show. And I encourage everybody to go check Danielle out on LinkedIn. Hi, Danielle.
Oh, you're muted, I think, still.
There's a way to start the show, right?
There you go.
Yes, how do you engage
Well-
people? By being silent.
There we go. Well, thank you so much, Deirdre, for having me and Martin as well. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so it's great to have you. So, our topic is the power of storytelling. And we do so much storytelling today. When aren't we telling stories, Danielle, and how to engage people? And maybe we could just kick it off because we do talk a lot about the brand persona and how you show up and how that enhances your story. Maybe you could just share how to develop one.
Yeah, it's a great question. I might even start by saying that if I think back on my own journey, and we talk about the brand separately, I actually think that I learned that as I was going. So the famous saying, kind of fly the plane and build it at the same time. There was a little bit of that, I believe, in my journey, and I think that probably a lot of people fall into that boat because sometimes we actually don't even know how we want to show up or what's the right way for ourselves to show up until you just start joining conversations and seeing what you're comfortable with and kind of establishing yourself. But really, when you build that brand persona, whether it's for yourself or a brand, I always like to say, start out by thinking about what are your values, what's your overall purpose or what's your why, as Simon Sinek always says. And if you're joining us today and you haven't seen the video, it's worth just Googling Simon Sinek why. It's just a really good exercise. It's not that long. And I think it actually ties in really nicely with this conversation. But I always like to figure out what are my values and who am I trying to connect with? Because if you're coming onto social media and you're just out there and you're not sure why or in service of what, it makes it really difficult to kind of be consistent and to want to keep doing it, especially when time gets crunched. So I always like to think about who my audience is, what are their needs, and how can I connect with them? And that helps as well. And then think about who you are as an individual. I think our personalities play such a big role into this brand persona. And the same for corporate brands, right? Are you playful? Are you fun? Are you helpful? Are you going to be more innovative and cutting edge, reflective? But you kind of have to figure out how you want to show up that way, which is going to kind of inform the language you use and how you communicate and your tone, and how you kind of have those back and forth conversations with people. Because really, I think that brand persona is what enables you to find what they say your tribe is. So who are the people that are interested in you because of the way you show up, which helps then build kind of that connectedness and how that engagement with your audience, and really differentiates you from everyone else. So I'm sure if someone were to, maybe even, I always say a good test of a brand persona is either be blindfolded and listen to what people are saying, or scroll any social media feed. And if you can not look at the individuals or the brands that are posting, from what you see visually, can you tell who the brand is? You can. I mean, there's some people on even LinkedIn. I know just from scrolling, I don't even have to look at who it is. I know it is that person because of the way it reads or the way it visually shows up. They just are so consistent with how they show up, that it speaks for them even when they're not present. But those are some of the things that I think of.
I think it's, oh, sorry, Martin.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the consistency is critical because it's the expectation. When you're building your purpose and your values, and you mentioned the tone, your speaker personality, people expect you to show up a certain way. So whatever you choose, you have to bring it wherever you go.
Yes, absolutely. And then you'll start seeing people echoing your brand persona in conversations like, oh, Deirdre's always so helpful, or I always love the insights that she's sharing, because you've built that through everything that you do. And I think that's when it starts really building a big presence, because, the saying goes, it's not who you know on social media, it's who knows you. Mm-hmm. And you want people to know you the way you see yourself, and that you want others to see you.
Yeah, I think that's really good. What I want to just add is humanity is so important, just being a human. And part of that is many of us work from home or are hybrid, and, life happens around us. That's to me, one of the positive things that came out of COVID is we didn't have to be super buttoned down all the time. So Danielle, your dog is having some fun talking to people. No, but that's okay, because I've been on client calls where the doorbell rings. It's like, oh, excuse me for a second, I just have to go get this package, right? Whereas before, we would have all been mortified had that happen in a business.
I'm still mortified, actually.
Oh, are you? Not me. Now it's like, oh yeah, whatever, because we all are human. And I think it's important to let that humanity come out in our posts. As brand too, a brand, has personality. You got to let that come out.
And we were so produced before.
Yeah,
that's the difference. There's less of the production. We use it when we need it. But to speak to your point, Martin, it feels good just to be more human and natural, especially on social media.
Now, I do put on a Zoom shirt, so an iron shirt. So when this is done, I'll probably change, because I'm just working at home on stuff and writing. But whatever.
Version.
But
that's behind the scenes.
I love your emphasis on produced, Deirdre, because I think that's often a hurdle for a lot of people on social media, that they overthink. Oh my gosh, I've got to think this through. I need a fancy image. Mm-hmm. I've got to, rewrite this 15 times. Whereas often it's just your genuine, authentic voice, or who you are, and just your thoughts, or maybe a hurdle you've overcome and how you've overcome it. And just really talking in a very casual and connected way, you're going to get a lot more engagement from your audience, because they see themselves in the conversation you're having. And I think that's something that we lose when you overproduce.
It's a great point.
Yeah. A couple of comments. One from Charles. I have a friend on LinkedIn who uses it more like Facebook, and says LinkedIn wants you to post your life. So his friend posts drawings, songs, the occasional article on his profession, and that's good. Yeah, LinkedIn's become much more of they've added social to really the professional network. Yes. Amanda says, we've seen a trend for social media brands becoming more casual. I think it adds to transparency and authenticity. And a question from Lisa, will there be a playback? Yes. At the end of this recording, you just go to this event, click play, and you'll see the recording. So you can watch it anytime you want. And if people have to drop off, you can come back when you'd like to watch it.
Yes, and Muhammad says being human is the true way to connect with your audience. Spot on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's another here's a question from Latha. How can you be natural? Tips, please. So how can either you as an individual or a brand be more natural and engaging on social media?
That's a great question. So I would say as an individual, one of the things I like to do, so maybe this will help others, is if I'm in a meeting or if I'm having a conversation with someone, or maybe just going for a walk and I'm reflecting on my day or something that's come up, I'll just take notes because we're constantly overcoming obstacles. We're constantly teaching others. And we don't think of it that way. But if you actually think about how you spent every minute of your day, there's an activity you are doing that someone else would benefit from. So I like to write those down because otherwise I lose those, because I look for big moments. And those are the moments that I'm like, this is what we're going to put on social media, but it's not. Everyone benefits from the little moments. When we think about, you see someone's success, you see the tip of that iceberg, right? You don't see everything underneath the water, but it's what's underneath the water that people want to see and connect with. So I think if we can find the way to capture that for ourselves, a lot of times if I'm out walking my dogs, which you heard barking, I'll have these reflections and I quickly just write those down in Notepad, and those become almost conversation starters. And then when we think of a brand, more often the brand is projecting out. The brand has an objective and it has maybe business campaigns, services, solutions, things that it wants to communicate out. But you also have to remember that behind that brand are voices, and those voices are all your employees. And if you can bring them forward and basically add some humanity to that brand, allow them to tell some of those stories and talk about their experiences doing some of the things that you do with your clients, now you've kind of added a different perspective into all the content that's out there. And we connect more with that because those have trust inherently built in them. You don't trust a brand, you trust people.
On the note of trust, so what you said makes so much sense, where it's the people behind the company. But if the company doesn't have that trust of the people going out on social media, that's where you don't have that authentic sharing and it stays produced. So that's really tough, which just means they need social media education. And everybody needs your social media strategy, Danielle. Right?
And I think companies are going on a journey. I mean, there's still, there's organizations that are incredibly progressive, that are some that are just getting started. There's some in regulated industries, so they have a little bit of a different approach to it. But I do think more and more, at least from what I see, a lot more organizations are definitely investing more in their people, in kind of purpose-led conversations, and in building engagement with their communities, because that is really where the future is going. It's definitely not a PR broadcast channel.
Okay, so there are a couple more questions on here. Hang on, let me get to them. Nicholas had one. Consistency online is key. It helps build a brand, but I'm of the ilk that although consistency is key to the way in which you present yourself or your brand, the consistency that's key to the way you present yourself ought to be different because social platform engagement audiences are varied. What are your thoughts on that? And I think what Nicholas is saying is that how do you present yourself differently on other on various platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, that's a great point. And I also think what is consistent for you is going to be different than me, because we first of all have to do what we want to do in terms of the time we can commit to showing up. But then we also build that. I mean, I'm of the mindset, you can read an article right now on the best time to post on any platform, and you could probably find an article that will conflict with that just as easily. So everyone has a point of view on this, but I feel like we create that consistency. So if you decide to show up every day within a certain period of time, your community is going to start to know, oh, Martin's always online. They're on 8 to 10 a.m. So I want to go online and chat with Martin while he's there. And you kind of build that with your community. And the same way brands can do that as well. And I think that's why when you're erratic, it makes it a lot more difficult, because then you don't know when and where your community is going to be and when they're going to be online. But at the same time, if you are kind of working across time zones, just build a cadence and stick to it. It's kind of, I always say, it's like the New York Times. If you get it home delivered to you, you know it's going to arrive between a certain period of time every day. Can you imagine if your paper just haphazardly arrived at random times of day or random days of week? You'd never know when to look for it. So if you want to have a two-way conversation with people, help them know when to show up. And so that's why I always say to people, build a consistency that works for you, and then build that connection. And some people even tell others. I've seen some people on social actually say, I show up every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And they help people know when they're going to be present to start building that cadence. So there's so many different ways to do it. But I think it's really important that you do that in connection with your community that you're trying to engage or build.
I think the type of content too, your consistency. You might not spread the same exact content throughout all your channels, but depending on the channel, you'll show up consistently with the type of content that your audience loves and the people who you want to have deeper relationships with.
Yes. And then your frequency is going to change by channel too, right? I mean, the frequency that you put on a Twitter is going to be really different than the frequency you'd put here. And so you kind of have to think about how each channel has its unique characteristics.
Yeah, that's good. Deirdre, we'll get to your next question, but I just want to go through because we're getting so many great comments. So Div Yang, also a former student, brands are a reflection of the people who built it, which is really good point. Melly said there is more than 100 luxury brands with LinkedIn pages, but in his observation, only about 5% comment. Mohammed said by being authentic, showing vulnerability and demonstrating empathy, we can establish a genuine connection with others and foster a sense of community, which is so important. And as he says, especially relevant in the digital age where technology can often make us feel disconnected and isolated. Being human reminds us that we are not alone and that we share similar struggles and experiences. It is an essential aspect of our social and emotional well-being, and it helps us lead more fulfilling and satisfying lives. Wow, that's really well written and well said. So thank you, Mohammed, and thanks everyone else.
Now we can wrap up.
Yeah, now we can go. Deirdre.
Okay, so I think I'm going to combine this. It's a two-parter. Danielle, what strategies help with the meaningful presence and relationship building? And then what maybe should you avoid? What should you not do?
I mean, it's a great question. I think as some of the comments actually touch on this as well. I would say, first of all, lead by giving. Like, you really need to think about, this is not just about you broadcasting your agenda. You're online because you're looking to build relationships in order to accomplish something. So if we can all lead by giving, contribute into people's conversations, there's so many ways as well that brands can do that by providing value. Someone was just talking about the luxury brands and how I think he said about 5% of them actually comment back. Well, imagine that brand that you can have an exchange with. If you say something to them, they respond back, and you have an exchange, and you're able to actually walk away with a sense of feeling of what it's like to connect with that brand. It could be educational content. You could introduce people to one another, share behind the scenes, but the whole concept of leading by giving. And then you've almost earned the opportunity to now present something to that community that you want to get across, because otherwise, I'm not sure why you should expect them to just give you their time. I also think being genuine, we talked about empathy as well. You want people to get to know who you are. So avoiding, a lot of brands would use those robotic responses. And if you look across their messages, it's the same cut and paste response all the time, right? I think there's an opportunity now where we should be genuinely speaking to each individual. And that doesn't mean you're not maintaining a voice, but we can do more and we can give more than have a robotic response. And then listen. I think one of the best strategies to have a meaningful presence is to listen. Listen to your community, listen to what they're asking for, listen to what they're sharing, and then respond back to them in a really timely manner. In terms of what not to do, I mean, I would say the first thing is, the concept of just going online and posting every day. All you do is post. I would say whether you're an individual or a brand, think about how you show up on social media. You should be engaging in conversations more than you're posting content. I always, when I work with individuals, I always say you could start with actually a comment strategy. Think about your audience, the areas of expertise or experience that you have, and join conversations to contribute and give generously in that space. And you can actually build a really good presence with more engagement and less actual posting. And then start building that posting into your conversation. But more often, it's people post, and they post tirelessly, and then they wonder why no one's engaging. It's because you haven't led by giving first. So I would definitely say what not to do is just kind of post. Another thing I would say what not to do is don't post something unless, well, first of all, you've read it. And secondly, don't post something without having something to contribute about what you're posting. I always see the reshares, for example, or retweets. I mean, I look for what does Deirdre think about this piece of content that you're resharing, because you're sharing it into my space, into the community. So I want to know that you actually have a really interesting point of view, or you learned 3 things from this and you're sharing it with us because you really think it's an important piece of content that we also could benefit from. That's so much more meaningful and drives such more connectedness than just resharing something. And I'm like, I wonder why that was reshared. And then I'm left to wonder what your thoughts are on it. And then I have to go in myself and take a look at it to try and see, is it something that I'm interested in? So help your community know that this is something that they want to learn from as well, or join you in this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And there is a time for just reposts, say, or retweets. And that I usually, for me, it's when it's promotional. So let's say we've had a conversation about an event like this, for example. Deirdre might post something day of the event to say, hey, it's coming up in an hour, join us. That's where I would just repost it rather than saying, yeah, better be there, because I have nothing of value to add, but I want also to let my network know about it. But your point about commenting, and I would say tag the person you're talking to. That's really important. That's also important when you're sharing something. If you're sharing, say, an article or a post that you really enjoyed, give credit where credit is due. Tag the person, say, by so-and-so. First of all, it alerts them, but it could start a conversation and a bit of a relationship with them too. And, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
goodwill. Giving credit,
Yeah.
not taking it as if it's your own. People appreciate that. And chances are, if you do tag them, they'll jump in and thank you, and a conversation could go from there. Danielle, I have a question for you. When brands want to engage, so it is the brand and there's a person behind it, do you recommend that the person sign their name on the post as they add value, or it can just be from the brand?
That's a great question. I think that depends on the brand, and also just the maturity of the brand, the sophistication or the size of the brand. I've seen it both ways. I've been in opportunities doing it both ways. One obviously allows the person behind there to come forward. And I've found that sometimes you do work with colleagues that don't want that.
Right.
They want the anonymity because they may or may not have a presence on social media, but they're working in the capacity behind the scenes. Also, it depends on what you're having a conversation about, right? If it's a very jovial, kind of friendly response, that's different than if it's maybe something customer service related,
Right.
or maybe even a brand reputation management situation where you really don't want to kind of be yourself out there because it's not you per se having this conversation, but often the person kind of coming in is then going to look you up and kind of use that in a different capacity. So it kind of really depends on the situation. And then the other thing is, as well, as from a brand consistency perspective, there's something to be said about just having just the brand speaking with those consistent values, voice, tone. But I do think whatever the approach is, it needs to be really clearly documented, and that strategy needs to be consistent across the organization so that everyone is working together. So you don't have a mixed experience externally.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
We have a lot more comments, and I'm going to go through and thank you to everyone who's here for the comments. And then at least two questions from people who are watching. So we'll get to those, and that may take us to the end.
And I mean, I can definitely say it as well, Martin. I think I mentioned when we were off before, I love going back afterwards and connecting with people after LinkedIn Live. So I will go through after this kind of posts and watch the replay and engage as well, because like we're talking about engagement, community relationships, right? I think part of it is expressing gratitude for those who've joined us today and making sure that we can answer their questions and take those opportunities to continue the dialogue.
Yeah. So Mohammed said, emotional connections also promote trust, loyalty, which can lead to deeper friendships and professional connections. Nico said, agree, you need to earn the opportunity to promote pitch. And he suggested reading Permission Marketing by Seth Godin, which is a great book.
It's a great book.
Not all brands can follow the same path, and that's why having tracking measurement in place by looking at, analytics is crucial these days. Absolutely, you've got to have your analytics. And then we have, excuse me, a question from Charles. And Charles, thank you for being patient. I only see about a quarter of people use hashtags. Some overdo it. Are hashtags even worthwhile on LinkedIn?
That's a great question. I would say I'm not the Bible when it comes to LinkedIn expertise, but I will at least share some of the ways that I use hashtags, we use hashtags. And the guidance I've always gone with is, a few hashtags, like maybe 3 or something at the bottom of your post that are relevant to the topic that you're in, because they do categorize content. So if you look up, pick future of work, which is one of the hashtags I follow. So if you go look up future of work and you search that, and then you go to recent or top, you have a choice there. It's going to show you all the content that people have applied the hashtag future of work to in a stream. So it's a wonderful way to build new connections or find people interested in that same topic and start networking, or maybe even find a target audience or find a sales target or something. So from that perspective, I always see using them as very valuable because it does categorize your content so that others can see it as well. A lot of people use a personal hashtag as well, because that's a nice way if someone just goes in and types in. So I use Danielle Media. So if you just go and type in hashtag Danielle Media, you'll see all my posts. It's just an easy way to find them all. Organizations use them as well if we're trying to, get a sense of colleague community or conversation around a specific topic. So you'll often see, maybe with Pride Month, you might see a brand use, the name of that organization and Pride in a hashtag. And that's easy then for the brand to be able to engage with their employees and their community that are posting on the conversation. And it's also easy for you to just find the content to be able to see who's actually engaging, and it's a nice way to get a size of the conversation. So it kind of depends how you want to use them, but I do use them, but I don't put 25 of them there, because I think then you start losing the value. And you want to make sure that you're doing it to help and not to just try and be very spammy. Now, on a different platform though, it's a very different set of rules for hashtags. So it goes back to your question, Deirdre, is that as you move across the different social ecosystems, you got to know each platform and what the best practices are there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm going to share a link to the top hashtags on LinkedIn in 2021. Someone actually did research and compiled it in a Google Doc or a Google Sheet. It's really interesting. And one of the things that I noticed from it is oftentimes when you spell out the words, so artificial intelligence instead of AI, public relations, say, instead of PR, so the spelled out version gets more engagement.
And actually, I would say, Martin, as well, that you see that inconsistency happen now as you move to another platform. So on LinkedIn, human resources gets a lot more engagement. On Twitter, hashtag HR. Somewhat obvious reasons when you think of characters and stuff. But yeah, so one other tip I would say is, for a personal perspective or a brand, I like to create hashtag maps. So we were talking about earlier on about your brand persona. What are the key conversations that you or your brand are going to be focused on? And then for those conversations, use the document you're sharing, Martin, and then go into the search and look up the keywords that your target audience would search on to find your product, services, solutions, or you. And then look up and see, are those relevant hashtags on the channels that I'm on? And create little create a page that shows, for this conversation, these are the hashtags. And for this conversation, these are the hashtags. And then you can be consistent when you're having those conversations to use them, so that you keep having your content show up in those content feeds when someone searches on them.
Yeah, and we have about 2 minutes left, and there are so many questions to get to. So fortunately, Danielle, you are going to go through them.
Yes.
We're going to go through them too. Let's see, where's what here?
There's one, I see one from Chell Lancaster.
Yes.
How do you quantify to leadership, used to being vowed by views, etc., the value you deliver through content where you've engaged actively in conversations with your readers?
So we're talking about just the back and forth commentary and not the actual clicks through to the content that the commentary is around.
Well, there's monitoring around that. I'm still thinking that Sprout Social captures engagement and can show that back and forth. And sometimes you just have to go in and grab their endorsements, or whatever your customers are saying that's a really good compliment to you. That has to be pulled out in your monthly report as well.
Yes, but I do agree, like Sprout Social, Khoros, a lot of these enterprise applications absolutely capture engagement. And you can even filter out engagement and pull out the reactions.
Yes.
So you get rid of the likes. And now you can actually say, overall, our engagement is this, and then just our comments are X.
Right.
And that's a big differentiator. And if you can actually show that versus your competitive set, you can actually start showing how you're building a lot more community engagement, which will connect your follower growth or your subscriber growth if it's a newsletter,
Right.
etc.
And also, you'll see champions that you didn't even know existed. Using a Sprout Social will draw out people who are shouting about your brand and you don't know it. And then you can engage with them and bring it out more. And they can be even bigger and better ambassadors.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that brings us, oh my gosh, to the end. So we have lots. We're going to have, you know what, Danielle, we're going to have to have you back too. So many of our guests, the
We need a part
discussions-
two.
I know we need a part 2 for
We
sure.
need a part 2. So we will have you back. And one of the questions was, who do you connect to on LinkedIn? Well, one, hopefully you're connected to or following Deirdre and me, but definitely connect to Danielle at LinkedIn and on Twitter. And you can learn so much from the way Danielle comments back on posts about how to adapt that to your own style and your own brand. Anyway, Danielle, thank you so much for
Thank you,
taking the
Danielle.
time.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I look forward to watching the replay and engaging in conversation with the community. So thank you to everyone that took the time to join us as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks to everyone for watching, listening.
We'll see you in June. Thank you, everybody.
Have a wonderful May.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.